Do you want to learn the tricks that top leaders use to get the most out of themselves and their teams? Well, Naftali Hoff is here to help. Lead to succeed. Picks the brains of top leaders to learn about their challenges, insights, and best practices. Here's Naftali.
Hello, Lead to Succeed Nation. It's Naftali Hoff, and welcome to Lead to Succeed, episode 133. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Brent Pohlman. Brent is the owner and CEO of Midwest Laboratories, which performs analytical testing in human health, animal health, and agriculture environmental. In 2023, Brent released his first book, Leaders Look Within. The book is a testimony to Brent owning his heart to live a life of gratitude. Brent, I'm so glad to have you on the show today.
No, it's great to be on the show, Naftali.
Okay, and welcome, by the way, to the world of authorship. I've got 2 books, and I will tell you, it is not a small feat. Anyone who sees that someone has written, recognize that a lot has gone into that process. Hopefully, we'll talk about that in a little bit. I'd love to start, though, with just your story. How did you get started? Talk me through it a little bit.
Yes. So as you said, you talked about Midwest Laboratories. I'll probably just go from there. I'll do the real quick here. My father founded the company in 1975. I worked through high school, college as a family business. And then after college, my dad and I had a pact where I needed to go off and work on my own and bring some experience back to the company if I ever decided to come back. In 2005, I came back as a marketing director. In 2016, my dad and his two partners retired. And so it was my dad and I for the next five years. In 2020, my dad retired at the age of 80, and the company is 1 year away from celebrating 50 years.
Wow.
We are a lab that does testing, again, in 3 verticals: animal, human, and agriculture environmental. And we are a production lab. We do high volume sample testing. So when we say soil sample testing, in the fall after harvest, we get anywhere from 20,000 to 40,000 samples a day. On the pet food side, we get about 1,000 to 2,000 samples a day year round. So we are a high production analysis lab that does the analysis and gets results back in 3 to 5 days for our clients. That's a little bit about the...
What would a client want to, let's say you said soil testing. So what are they typically looking for, and how does your testing help them?
Sure. We do a lot of work, again, with growers, ag retailers. They are looking to maximize the potential that's in that soil with the nutrients. So they're looking at fertilizer applications, plant applications, water, everything to maximize yields. So they take that data and analyze it to see how to best do that, whether it's good spots, bad spots. And probably about 2007, when precision ag really took off with computerized monitoring of fields, that's when our volumes really took off too, was about 2007.
Interesting. So I'm curious about this pact you had with your father. I'm wondering if, in retrospect, you thought it was a good idea. Did it help you? Would you recommend other people do something similar? Because, if you have founders, their kids, there's an assumption, I would imagine, that for most of them, unless the kid really doesn't like what the dad or the mom is up to, they're going to follow in suit because it's just an easy path for them to get right into things and whatnot. So I'm curious to know if that's a recommendation you would make to help them gain a little bit of independence and outside perspective, or if you felt it would have been better for you to jump right in and learn this business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it was the absolute right thing to do. One of the other partners that my dad worked with, he had sons and daughters in the business, but they came right out of school. And when you come right out of school, you don't know what's on the outside. I know if I would have come here right out of college, I would have always wondered what's on the other side. By going to the other side, working in corporations, teaching in the classroom, having that experience, when the time was right to come back, I knew that I was ready. I knew that I could add some value because I had been in the corporate world, in the accounting, in the HR, in the systems world. And I had a nice, good set of experience to come back to the business and really see how I could use those skill sets again to help the company.
Sounded like you had multiple positions. I mean, you mentioned classroom teacher, you mentioned accounting. How many different jobs did you have during those 5 years?
So it was a period of about 15 years, and every
15
5 years,
years.
15 years before I came back. And I taught for 5 years right out of the gate in high school and college, and then worked in the corporate world at companies like Mutual of Omaha, Arthur Anderson just before went down, and then an engineering company called HDR here in Omaha. And
Hmm.
most of my career was spent again doing systems implementation, PeopleSoft in the HR, finance, um, and and recruiting on that side. And I think what all those experiences again together helped shape me for coming into this marketing role that was happening in 2005. And obviously the advent of Google and internet was really coming alive. iPhones, all that technology was really, I came at a great time. I mean, timing is
Okay.
everything, but I did really
Yeah.
come at a time.
Yeah, timing is everything, and you can't really know it until it's happened. So let me ask you this. I don't know if this is a question you get often. I have a background in education as well. I was in the field for much longer, and I continue to provide coaching and consulting services. In fact, on Monday, which is President's Day, so you get a sense of when we're recording this, I will be up in Chicago, not a little bit closer to you than where I am currently, to do multiple trainings for educators. They have like a full day teacher training program. So what would you say are the primary, let's say, what would be two lessons? Let's start here. What are two lessons minimally that corporations can learn from educators or from schooling?
What corporations can I, and I've never been asked that question, by the way, before. I think I think with teaching, obviously you have to know the product, you have to know what the content that you're going to relay, and you have to temper that with experience. Somehow you have to have the experience, but all types of teaching skills, if you have, I think leaders today, we're moving from titles to more leading, teaching, and coaching. I say teaching and coaching because we have to reinforce skill sets. And I think I loved coaching too, by the way, in high school. That was one of my biggest, I loved that part of it too. But I think coaching is really needed today with our directors, our managers, because you have to continually reinforce learnings. You have to continually reinforce knowledge. So I think that teaching background really helped me as far as managing and leading today.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, look, it's a bit of a plug just because that's what I do now. I moved from education into coaching, so I totally get it. And I see oftentimes that people, the biggest problem, especially for leaders themselves, many of them also need coaching, but they hire them based off of, let's say, qualifications on the previous level. And often those previous levels are more about what the individual, him or herself, is doing for their respective team. Let's say they're a great salesperson, or they do really well in terms of their delivery on services. And now they're asked to manage others. Now they're asked to go to the next level and to think about creating a vision, creating a culture for a team, uh, motivating people, dealing with their challenges. So it moved from me to we. It's
Mhm.
actually a chapter that I have in my book, my first book, Becoming the New Boss, where I talk about that leaders really need to shift their mindsets. So I think it is very valuable to have coaching for those leaders, really for all of them, but mid-level managers in many ways in particular, because they're new to this whole arena of leadership in a more formal setting, and many of them don't even know where to start. So is there any other advice in that context that you would want to share to
No,
help people develop their people?
you have summed up what it's taken for the last 2 to 3 years is really that whole development of managers and directors. Because I'm working with science people, they're very analytical mind, totally different, uh, on a totally different level. And it's great, but it takes time. It takes investment. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a week, a week long training. It has to be reinforced. It has to be gone over. Um, and we're making a difference. You've succeeded when your own science people want to go back and they want to go get their MBA, or they want to learn more about this whole working with people because they understand it's a whole different level of being a manager, director, or leader. So I'm seeing that even in our own staff, which is really excites me. And
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
cool. I really do.
Yeah,
It's
it really
needed.
is. And And I actually just wrote an article on emotional intelligence, and I'm working with one of my clients currently on communication skills in particular. She came to me with great technical skills, but was struggling to properly communicate both up to her superiors as well as to her direct reports. So I'm curious to know, what advice would you give to somebody who specifically is struggling with their emotional intelligence, where maybe they are, you talked about having a bunch of science, scientists and people who are really good in that area, and it's a different part of the brain. It's a different part of how we interact. I might be really good at my cubicle developing these concepts, or in a lab, studying or analyzing, etc. But if I am going to be part of a team, or I am going to be reporting data, I need to be out of my own head, right? So any advice there that you think people would benefit from?
I really believe leadership is very personal, and a person has to want it. You have to own it yourself. You've got to know first off, I think a lot of people, and I look back at my own career, I just went through the whole day, didn't even think about my core values. I didn't think about what my whole everything coming together. Today, it's part of a daily routine. I think having a daily routine and getting the mindset every single day is just it's I have to do that every single day. And I'm such a better person because of it. But it really takes working, I think, working with a coach. If you really are a person is very serious about it, get some one-on-one coaching to find out what that is. You're not going to get that in a classroom. You're not going to get that in I read so many books. Work with somebody on it, because it really, again, it takes reinforcing. It really takes learning about yourself more, taking the time to learn about yourself and just spending that time. And when you do that, you again become such a better person for yourself, because you got to know yourself first before you can lead others. And once you do that, I really believe you will be an effective leader.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. And the thing in particular you said towards the beginning, that you have to want it, you have to own it. Um, it's so true, because I have certain clients that, because of my work, let's say in schools in particular. So oftentimes a school will have an allocation, often federally funded, or based off of their district, et cetera, where they have funds, and they want to utilize those funds to help individual teachers. And so the teachers are getting this coaching. They didn't ask for it necessarily, but they're getting it. And, oftentimes you wonder, does the client want it enough? Are they really prepared to own this? And even with my quote unquote paid clients, like people who are actually paying it for themselves, whether their businesses themselves, et cetera, I try to go through a process to determine upfront. I hope they're not just throwing money at me. I want them to really feel like this is something I need, and it's something I'm going to work towards. Because oftentimes when we get inundated with work, when we feel pulled in different directions, it's the self-development that usually goes first, right? Because I'm too busy putting out fires, I'm too busy getting my job done. I don't have time to think about what some people might view as fluff, or a nice bonus, or whatever it might be. So you as a client, I think, need to hear this, but I think the leaders too, before you say, "Oh, I'd love to bring coaching to my team," there's a certain readiness that I think has to be there, certain open conversations that need to be in place, where, hey, we're struggling here, our feedback has not been great in this area. We need to do something about it. And so this is a way that I've identified, and let's take it from there. But it's not just a given that people are going to want and own these processes.
Absolutely. No, it's hard. And I work together closely with my chief strategy officer, Dana, and she is so good at that. I mean, she has invested 2 to 3 years in our directors. I mean, we're not talking 1 year, 2 to 3 years to really get them to really own the process themselves. And that's what it really takes. It takes a lot of, I can't believe, at first I couldn't believe the investment she was making in people, but it really takes something like that, and then it finally clicks, and then the person wants it for themselves, and then then it just really does take off. But it does take a lot of time and investment if in
Mm-hmm.
people, but it's so
Mm-hmm.
worth it as a company.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we are such a better company than 3 or 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, you can tell.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Let's talk about your book for a minute. I know I'd like to hear more about it, what the focus is and who the audience is. I know in the bio I mentioned that your intent is to live a life of gratitude. And so I'm curious to know, first of all, where does that mission, so to speak, come from? What's the tie into the book? Take us through it.
Yeah, we've kind of hit on different pieces as we've talked just now. But the premise of the book really came through my transformation in the last 5, 6 years. I was highly reactive 6 years ago. When I took over with my dad, I saw my dad who had never got out of the operations till he was 80. And I think that's why he never knew how to lead the business. And he ultimately had to because of health reasons. And I think he just reached a point that staying home was not going to work for him. Um, but it, but through that process, you have to really learn who you are yourself. And again, I remember someone asking me my why, and I'd give an answer, and and again, it was Dana. She just kept asking me, "What's your why? What's your why?" And she would ask me over and over. I was almost getting frustrated because I would change my mind, or it just wasn't that strong. And that's when I really woke up and just said, something's got to change here. If we're going to lead effectively, I have to get out of this reactiveness. I got to do some more on the emotional intelligence side. And that's really what the book is. It's more my perspective. So here's some things that worked for me. I mean, who am I to talk about leadership? I mean, there's thousands of leadership books out there, but I think what I really learned through the whole process is that it's personal. You've got to own it, and you've got to really have strong core values if you're going to lead effectively. And for me, it's part of a daily routine. I wake up with a heart of gratitude. I do something physical activity. I got to get the mind, the body, everything going, the blood flowing. And then I journal. I write down things. I write down things like my goals for the day. One of the best things I write down that helps me deal with pressures is, what was I uncomfortable with yesterday? I have to write that down every single day. What was I uncomfortable with? And then by doing that, I can choose to do I need to spend time on this? Or is it just something that really I don't? I just need to just let it go, or, you know, I don't need to spend time on that. But I've gone from being highly reactive to much more relational. And you will get
Okay.
further with people than any process or technology is what I'm convinced of.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Nice. I appreciate the story, the background, the context. Let's actually talk about journaling. I
Okay.
have some curiosity around it too. But if I'm going to go to stereotypes, I would imagine that most people who journal are women. And I think that many of them are doing it, in part of, let's call it a self-care package. It might include everything from yoga or meditation, prayer of some kind, exercise, the food piece, all of that. And journaling is an element there. Most male CEO types are not assumed. I don't know if they do or don't. I don't know the data, but I think if you ask someone, what is the average, what is the percentage of white, male CEO types that are out there journaling on a day-to-day basis, if I had to guess, I would say people would probably say 5 to 15%. Not a very high number. I have no idea, but I'm just going to guess that number. You might have a different view on this. I'm curious to know how you came to that, and if you had to make a pitch on behalf of the Journaling Association of America, which I have no idea if it exists, but let's pretend it does, and you were going to be their spokesperson, um, what would you say have been the main benefits for you to go through that process, despite the busyness and everything else you have going on personally, and the fact that it may not have been anything you thought of doing in your 20s and 30s and in those years?
Well, I did learn mine through a mastermind. It's called the Momentum Planner. It's Alex Sharfin is the person that I worked with, and it gave me again the structure that I needed to see every single day. It's all filled out. What are your top 3 goals? What are you grateful for? What are you uncomfortable with? Uh, those For me, I have to have it structured. I don't just sit down an empty sheet of paper and write down what my goals are for the day. I used to be one of those that kept a to-do list or a goal list. I have 3 top goals at the most, because I know that's how I'll be most effective if I have really 3. But what it really does, it just really gets your mind concentrated or in a framework where what's most important today, you know and it really we talked about our why. My why is I'm a person of faith who coaches people up and leads from the heart. I say that every single day. It's ingrained. And when we have those things ingrained and we do them on a regular basis, we become much more consistent in our actions and we grow in our awareness. I think that's really what it's all about. When we grow in our awareness, we can see things a whole lot differently, and we are much better, again, in much better place to make good decisions, really hard decisions, and that'll uh, take the company forward, move all of us forward versus backward.
Okay, so lead from the heart sounds a little bit like a platitude. I don't mean to be condescending, but
No, that's fine.
let's make a practical and brass tacks. What would that look like for
Well,
people?
for
What's
me,
an example of a distinction where leading from the heart versus not?
so I use the example, you're in a meeting with your top people and they all come to you and they say, I think everybody in this room deserves a 30% wage increase. My first reaction would have been, what the heck? Why are you guys saying all this? When you
Mhm.
lead from the heart, you're like, I literally, it's physical. I take a huge deep breath. Every time I say it, I take a huge physical deep breath and I say, okay, where's this coming from? What's really behind this? And it's really, again, it's more of a different mindset versus totally reactive, because I was majorly reactive at home, at work. And I think that's when I say leading from the heart, it comes together, mind, body, soul, spirit, everything comes together, and you just really think, what's the best way here? Versus the mind says, my first reactions are terrible 9 times out of 10. When I hear something right away, it might trigger something, it may be something from my past, whatever, but I just stop. I have control of that now. I didn't before. I would just say whatever. I didn't care. I mean, I really didn't, to the point where I didn't care what was, somebody would say something. I just, top of mind, boom, here it is. And we've all worked with those people too. And that's hard. I mean, and it's really comes from a weird place, because we never know really what's behind that. And is it true, or is it what's happening here? And we
So,
question it
so
and
I,
spend,
yeah. So
yeah.
I heard social from you. I heard emotional from you, but you also mentioned spiritual a few times. How does spirit factor in? What are the, because somebody might say, well, I'm a good people person. I'm connected with everyone going on, everything going around. I certainly, um, want to be socially connected, all those kinds of things. But you obviously are a firm believer, right? A believer in God, a believer in spirituality as a central element of your life and of your practice. How does that manifest for you?
Again, you have to want it and own it and believe it. I mean, you can say you have it, but again, if it's not part of your day to day in prayer, whether it's just where there's something, you always know there's something greater than yourself, and you're reminded by that. And to me, that's the gratitude piece. Then everything flows from God. That's where my whole life, that's where everything revolves around. So that's where and it really came to, there's times in life where it really hits hard, and it hit hard when my mom passed away. And she
Mhm.
had prayer journals, and I went through, and I kind of wanted to rediscover everything after she passed away. I didn't realize how much I missed my mom. And then I read all these journals and I said, you know what? I need to be more intentional about my faith. And I didn't even know what I was saying at the time. And after I said that and I prayed about it, I was like, I really need to work on this faith and this prayer, and get more spiritually grounded to lead not only myself, but again, see where that goes with others. But that's really where certain events, again, I think help us bring all that together. And in my case, it was my mom passing away that really, gosh, I see that power and prayer, and she prayed for so many people. I think that's what I needed to be doing too. She gave me
Mhm.
that example, and I need to really act on that.
It could be what I'm going to ask you now is colored by where I live, which is up in the Northeast, and different areas of the country have different views on spirituality and faith in the workplace. But I think for the most part, the trend has been for a long time to leave God out of business, so to speak, and to not bring elements of faith. It's okay if we talk about maybe God as a concept or the universe, and maybe we talk about spirits or spirituality on some level, but to make it more of a private endeavor and not sort of bring it front and center. in the workplace. And I'm curious to know, and it might be different in Omaha than it is in New York in that regard. Is that something that you just keep within yourself? Is it something that you, so to speak, wear on your sleeve and that affects others around you? What is your comfort level with bringing God to the office, let's
Yeah.
call it?
I do not force my faith on anyone. Now, if anyone asks me, I'll answer questions. And I think the way I did this, I talked about my mom, and this is a story that's in the book. When it was on my mom's birthday, my dad and I were I didn't want my dad to be alone. It was his first year, or within the year that she died. We went into this coffee house, and on the wall it said, "How can we pray for you?" And I looked at my dad and I said, I think mom's trying to tell us something. So if you walk in our main doors of our office, you will see a prayer wall to the left that any employee, guest, vendor can write any type of request, petition, and know that it'll be prayed for. It's very non-threatening. I think it's what's needed. I think people want to be prayed. Um, and there's other pieces I think of faith that can really be incorporated. One of the strongest things I think is calling each other by name. I think that's so respectful and personal. When we call each other by our names, and that's why I have 300 employees here. I'm trying to learn names. I don't know the names of everyone, and I forget often. But I know when I call somebody by their name, it really stops them in their tracks, and it makes the whole conversation a lot. It shows that I care. And that's
It
really what the
does.
whole purpose of faith is, I think, is by calling people by their name.
When I started as head of school, I asked one of the teachers who had access to this information to send me all the class pictures of the students with their names underneath. And that allowed me to learn names much more rapidly. And so even over the summer, when I was first getting into the community and all of that, and I would go to a restaurant or see some of the students, I'd be able to say, "Oh, you must be so and so," which helped me a lot. It gave me an advantage of walking in and not being a complete stranger for an entire year, let's say, however long it would have taken. Okay, so let me ask you, what is one piece of advice that you would give to someone who's just starting out
Get to know
as a
yourself.
leader?
As a leader, get to know yourself first. You better do the homework first, because you cannot effectively lead if you are not strong in your own values, mission and vision. You better have a strong mission and vision, because your employees are going to ask you every single day, where's the company headed? And you better be able to respond. In the early days, I didn't know. I said, I'm not sure. That was the wrong answer, because I didn't
Yeah.
even realize. I was telling them, oh my gosh, the leader doesn't even know where the company's going. Why would I want to be around here? You can't
Hmm.
have that. You have to know where the company is going. You have to be, and it may take you being out of the operations. I had my leadership team came to me and said, you need to get out of the operations and work on this, and take the company forward. And they were absolutely right. That's what a leader
Yeah.
does.
It is so funny you say that because I remember my first unofficial leadership experience that I recall. I was providing, let's call it rabbinic or kosher supervision for a restaurant on the west side of Manhattan. I was a high school kid. Maybe I was in 12th grade, and the organization, the certifying agency had somebody there, let's say Monday through Friday, regular hours. But this was a Saturday night, and so I would go there, and part of my job, just to make myself useful, because there wasn't all that much to do, was to man the register. That was basically it. At least that's what I was told. Then I get a phone call. It was the first night I was in the office, in the restaurant, and I say, someone says, "You have a phone call." I pick up. I didn't know who was calling me. I said, "Hello," and she says, "Is this the manager?" And I said, "I'm not sure," because nobody ever told me that I had the role of the manager that, while I was there. And then I checked with the lead waiter, and that's what he told me. Yep, that's what the rabbi typically does. And then I got back on the phone very sheepishly. So I learned right away what it's like to be a leader and not know what you're doing. Not that I've ever figured it out fully, but I certainly remember getting her like, "Are you sure you're the manager?" It put me in my place pretty quick. So
Yeah.
let's end this segment with the question I ask
Yeah.
all of my guests, Brent, and that is, what is the biggest mistake that you have made that has set you up for future success?
Um, I thought I could hire directors and leaders and bring them in from the outside to change the culture. in a hurry. And I did that. And I brought in 7 people. And within 4 months, I had marched all 7 people out because I had one of our science people who'd been here 15, 20 years said that I'm going to have 15 people walking if you don't do something here. I knew something was up during that time. And it really, I think it opened my eyes that you can't get there fast and you don't need to get there fast. You need to build something from the ground up. You got to have a strong infrastructure as a company. We've been working on our that's our goal for probably the last 4 years is infrastructure. That doesn't sound very sexy, but you have to have a strong infrastructure if you're going to continue to grow and lead with change and bring everybody along. So that was really the big lesson for me.
Nice. Okay. I don't think I hear that kind of response all that often. So thank you for sharing it.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're now going to go rapid fire, short and sweet. The first one is 3 action steps that every leader should do every day.
Routine, self-care, and listen.
Okay. If you had an hour with one person who you would never otherwise meet, and it could be a historical figure, who would it be?
Patrick Mahomes.
Interesting. If you would be repositioned from CEO to sports coach, which sport would you coach in?
Basketball.
2 strategies to become more connected spiritually.
Prayer and small groups.
Of?
Others that are in the faith.
Okay. A great exercise for people who are starting to feel their age. Physical exercise.
Great physical. Strength. Measure your strength.
Mm-hmm. I've actually heard that strength training is very important, especially as people are aging. Something neat about living in Omaha that most people don't know.
I think quietly it is kind of a secret area, but it is very flourishing. There's so much opportunity here. I would not go anywhere else.
Nice. And finally, a productivity tip that helps you to get more done.
Invest in your people. You'll go further with people than any technology or any process.
Nice. Okay. So how can people connect with you, learn about more about your work, get your book?
I would say the best is on LinkedIn. You can certainly find me on LinkedIn. My book, you can search my name, Brent Pohlman, on Amazon. I am working on a website. It's not quite done there, but LinkedIn, buy the book on Amazon, and that's probably the best way.
Awesome. So before we let you go, Brent, please leave us with one final life lesson to end the episode.
Surround yourself with great people. Take your time finding who those people are. But once you have them, you will know more about your company than you ever did when you were in the day-to-day operations if you find the right people that you can surround yourself with.
Awesome. Thank you, Brent. It's been a pleasure. Pleasure getting to know you. Pleasure to learn your story, learn from your wisdom and experiences. And I certainly am excited to share this with my audience.
Awesome. Thank you again for having me on the show.
Bye-bye now.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode and for investing in yourself so that you can lead to succeed. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show. Your feedback gives the show more social proof and encourages more folks to listen.